I would like to talk about just one message. It is one of the work that my student and I are doing in University of Minnesota. That is that the BrainMachine Interface has been really started to try to help disabled people, potentially for neuroprosthetic application. What the work we did is we say, okay, what about the application for healthy people, for normal people, to aid or enhance the everyday life? And particularly, we focus on bio-navigation in this case. So this cartoon really shows that brain-machine interface can be invasive and non-invasive, and at various levels, you will see in the later portion of this presentation by these distinguished panelists is on various invasive and manner. But my brief presentation is starting from non-invasive. This slide actually shows it's work done by my former PhD student, Han Yuan. And what we look at is say, okay, can we understand better that how this brain signal being generated during motor imagination, which have been heavily used to try to develop non-invasive brain-computer interface. So we use a functional MRI and develop innovative EEG source imaging modeling technique to look into what happening when we're imagining certain movement. And I'm not going to go through the detail of that. And basically, the message here you can see is that on the right column is actually you move the right hand. On the left column, these two columns is you're imagining moving right hand, but actually you don't move anything. On the first row is fMRI activation. The middle is beta wave EEG source image. And the bottom is EEG alpha activity. And we found that there's a high degree of co-localization that actually my student Han was very excited when she found this correspondence. So these are something that by looking into this non-invasive EEG brain-computer interface, we better our BCI system. So we did one experiment. That's really something I want to share with you. This is so-called, we designed a virtual campus of University of Minnesota. There's a virtual helicopter. And then by imagining moving different part of the body of the subject, we are trained to control the three-dimensional continuous BCI control of the virtual helicopter. And here you can see that on the left is actually keyboard control, right is BCI control. And you can see that actually there's a very high degree of correlation between the BCI control and the keyboard control, reaching 99% in terms of correlation coefficient. So here is I have a video to share with you. And, oops, okay. I guess I needed to get out here and then to directly click on the file. Actually, the first author, my student, Arjun Roy, is also on the audience. And Arjun and another student, Alex Da, and actually did the work. All right, let me see if... the only thing, I have never been a subject myself, so I don't have the capability to make things work by thinking about it alone. But I do have to click a certain key, but I don't know why that this key is not moving. Okay, looks like something is... Does anyone have any idea that how I can get this video working? It's trying to do something? No, I think it's going, but... All right. Okay. Then I think let's try to do it this way. If the actual video does not work, then I have to ask you guys to imagining you are seeing the video. All right? We are engineers, right? We're imagining moving the body to control the virtual helicopter. Now, please imagining you are seeing a virtual helicopter flying on the sky of University of Minnesota virtual campus controlled by EEG signal. Unfortunately, I apologize that we were not able to test it because the previous session was late. But anyway, this video actually is on the website of our lab website. So if you go to Google, type my name, Peng, you will go to my lab website, and we upload this video there, and you can see that video. So you don't have to imagine it. You can see the real video. Actually, I have 3-dimension. I don't think that's going to work either. But anyway, the comment, I think my time is coming up. So there's 2 messages. One is 3-dimensional BCI control has been made possible from non-invasive EEG signal in a continuous way. The second is that we demonstrate in this work that EEG-based BCI may help in our daily life, aiding healthy subject and not just the patient suffering from some other and neurological disorders. So here's a list of the students, and Han Yuan, Arjun Roy, Alex Dodd, and Ming Rose, who helped with the work I presented today, and Jim Ash is our collaborator for functional MRI experiment, and thanks to the NSF funding support and NIBIB and through a training grant. With that, I thank you for exercising your imagination capability today, and I'm done with my presentation. Okay, with that, I'd like to invite the next panelist, Professor Shankai Gao from Tsinghua University, to present her work.
Okay, thank you for being here. And the title I'm going to talk today is Brain-Computer Interface based on visual and auditory information. As we know, a BCI system consists of several key components, including data acquisition, signal processing, commands translation, and the system feedback. But I think the most important part in BCI system is our human brain. It is just because our human brain produces distinguished signals so that we can translate it into different control commands. So now the question is, how can we ask the subject to produce those distinguishable signals? So there are several ways to do that. First is based on external stimulus, including visual, auditory, tactile stimulus. Of course, different stimulus will produce different brain responses. And also, we can ask subject to pay attention to some specific targets. Also, we can ask subject to do some mental task actively. So all these methods, I think, have been used in current BCI system. And what I'm going to emphasize today is see if we can combine or integrate all these methods into one system, we probably will have a chance to get brain response at sensation, perception, cognition level, and which will happen at different time period with different frequency band, different spatial distributions. So if we can comprehensively use all these informations, probably we will have chance to significantly improve our performance of BCI systems. I'll give you some examples. First is a BCI based on visual information. For simplicity, if we think our brain is just a simple modulate, so the user intention could be modulated in our ERP or brain signals. So here's the example. For example, we can use frequency modulation method that is based on a visual stimulus. So for example, we can have several targets flash simultaneously, but with at different frequencies. So when a subject is focused on specific flicker, you will find a specific frequency components in their EEG signals. This is called frequency modulation method. Also, you can use phase modulation, time modulation, spatial modulation, code modulation, and covert selective attention modulation method to produce what I said, distinguishable brain signals. This is very important in our BCI systems. I don't think that I have time to go through all details. I think you can find all the data in our published paper. I just want to say we test all these paradigms and it works well. Another example is BCI system based on auditory information. So in our auditory BCI system, we present the spoken digits 1 through 8 to the subjects from different ears and with male or female voice. So we ask subject to pay attention to a target number, which is the subject designed selection. And also, we ask subject to do some mental task actively. So when the target number appears, instead of to do silent counting, we ask subject silent answers some questions. For example, where does the sound come from, left or right? Is it male or female voice? So this mental task significantly improved the response. So we combine all these techniques together. I mean, stimulus, attention, and active mental task. We got very good, we significantly improved the descriptabilities. And so you can find here is the target, the waveform for the target stimulus and for non-target stimulus. So I just want to say this is a very good example. So how can we ask or we use all the useful information at different levels? Okay, now conclusion. First, I think visual or auditory ERP-based BCI are very effective in practical use. Second, comprehensive use of brain signals in sensation, perception, cognition levels will improve overall performance of BCI systems. Okay, in the remaining 1 or 2 minutes, I'm going to share some information about BCI competition. As you know, there are several BCI competitions during the past decades. What I'm going to share you today is we organized a BCI competition last year in Tsinghua University, Beijing. This is, I think, the first on-site experiment BCI competition. That means we ask subjects to bring their own BCI system to operate the system real time in the game room. So it is I think this is very important to promote our BCI technique from lab show to practical use. So we organized the competition, and many teams did very good job. They used their own BCI system to control, let's say, virtual car on the screen or typing the character input the computer. I'll try to see if you can see the video. Okay. So this video shows in what's happened in the game room. So here we have okay. Now start. You can see the participants use their brain signal to control this virtual car on the screen. The car must be passed through several stops and with a limited speed. So this is one of the appointed tasks. And another one is character input. You can see how this is a modified P300 paradigm, and you can see how fast I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway. How fast the participants use their brain signal to input the characters. So I think I just want to say we hope our BCI technology can move out from our lab to real practical use. In last year, we have 35 teams from 17 universities join our competition. And probably we will have second competition next year. So if it is the case, you are very welcome to join the competition to show you distinguished BCI systems. Okay, this is our team member, and our project supported by the Chinese government, National Science Foundation, and the Ministry of Science and Technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Professor Nitish Sako from Johns Hopkins.
So Ben didn't clarify that I thought I was the only speaker for 90 minutes. And now I've got 7 minutes. And then second thing was that Mac doesn't work on this system. So we'll make do. So given the time constraint, I'm going to show 1 or 2 or 3 slides and some movies if this gets going. So I'm going to introduce essentially the idea of BCI, but related to neuroprosthetics. And since I won't be, oh, what is this? Whatever. Okay, so we are ready to, I think now need to start thinking about beyond brain-machine interface in the sense that what goes on beyond that. So BCI paradigm has been used for controlling the prosthetics, but now a variety of signals are possible. And just to get going, you have to think about how it was inspired, right? I mean, in my case, as a student, it was, the movies are not going to run, unfortunately, but Star Wars. Subsequently, DARPA took a major leap in using the brain-machine interface paradigm for controlling prosthetic limb. Again, I'm sorry, the movies are not going to run on the PC, so you just have to imagine that this is a whole idea of can you use neural signals to control prosthetic limb, and not only motor, but sensory. This animation would have shown that. That has resulted into this incredibly advanced limbs, such as this Johns Hopkins applied physics limb, which is 22 degrees of freedom prosthetic arm. And let me try one more time, see if the movies would work. I don't think they will. So that raises the question, how do you use brain signals to control these up to 22 degrees of freedom? Ben's movie is spectacular, should have shown 3 degrees of freedom. How do you achieve higher degrees of freedom? And that raises the question, should we use non-invasive signals, such as what you heard in the last 2 talk, or invasive, such as ECOG, or then local field potentials, or spikes? So I think that's becoming the very emergent or important question, because with EEG, you can achieve a fairly straight, again, these movies are not going to run, so neural control of an arm that can open and close. A robotic arm, we can make it work as good as what you saw earlier. The next in line is ECOG. ECOG is electrocorticogram signals where electrodes are now placed on the brain itself and improves some resolution because the signals are closer to the brain surface. And with this blue and red traces show that you can actually achieve high degree of specificity of individual finger that can be now decoded with ECOG signals. So with EEG, we can open and close an arm. With ECOG, we can go down to individual finger movement. And this trace basically shows 64 channels of ECOG, and we should have shown animation which would show that finger decoding can be done. If we go further down, if you implant microelectrodes in the brain, you can get either local field potentials or spikes. And local field potentials, the theory or assumption is that they improve reliability. What this graph shows that number of neurons on the x-axis and y-axis is decoding accuracy. And the more neurons you select, the higher the decoding accuracy. But local field potentials, in a sense, help out, improve the reliability over longer periods of time. So even if implantable electrode arrays lose neurons, for decoding purposes, local field potentials can be very helpful. And the last in line is the spikes, which means you're implanting microelectrodes in the brain, and even higher resolution and higher specificity. So I'm going to skip a lot of these slides and videos and so on, and go to this slide. So our ultimate goal would be this Luke Skywalker-like fiction of a prosthetic arm. Where we are today is that commercially these iLimb and other kind of dexterous multi-fingered hands are available. They are getting better in terms of cosmetics. The DECA arm, as well as Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab arm, are very high degrees of freedom limbs available. I think, at least in the US, the government has created a great investment through DARPA Revolutionary Prosthetics Program first. There's an emergent initiative right now on reliable neural interface, which will help us do. So this is, I think, like now and in future, so that this 22 degree of freedom control is achieved in a reliable manner. NIH grant challenge is saying, take it forward into patients, show that you can achieve the brain-machine interface in patients. And number of emergent, so I'm going to go through 7 or so challenges. One is the challenges in recording methods from going beyond these microelectrode arrays or these wonderful surface ECOG arrays that have been developed at Penn and Illinois. The second challenge is to improve the decoding accuracy using multiple scales of signals, EEG, ECOG, LFP. Each of these are vying for attention, and how far do we go in terms of accuracy or reliability? As I showed earlier, with large number of electrode implants, can we achieve higher degree of reliability over long periods of time is a major emergent challenge. Third one is understanding the whole brain as a fully organized system. You know, we think about BCI or neural control from one area of the brain, like M1 of the cortex, but a very large number of areas of the brains are involved, from prefrontal, parietal, premotor, motor, spinal cord, and so on. So the whole model of the brain has to be developed. I think that's a science challenge right now. Construct these large-scale model of grasp, reach, sensory feedback. I think the prosthetic revolution needs to continue because we need to improve the limbs that are reliable and mechanically functional. The devices and chips have to be developed for fully implantable neural control and systems. Oh, I don't know what happened. Okay, sensory feedback has been, is one of the another area that has not been worked on enough. Number of groups are working at the basic neuroscience level, but sensory feedback has to be brought into the whole brain-machine interface. And then finally, this sort of less invasive approach surgically and clinically, whether it's peripheral nerve innovation or ECOG-based approach, which may provide us that sort of a clinically viable solutions. And so I'll just conclude with a number of graduate students who have done the work, along with my collaborators who are clinicians or basic neuroscientists or applied physics team, and just again acknowledging that this is all possible because there is a certain revolutionary commitment to science and engineering from DARPA, from NIH and NSF in US, and that's making this possible. So like I think, while I say thank you, actually what I would like to share is that this is an area where there is a need to collaborate. As you saw, there is a whole range of problems from electrodes all the way to decoding to building the models. And I think this area needs that forward-looking thinking in highly collaborative manner. So I think that's my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Nitish. Our next speaker is Dr. Jose Principe from University of Minnesota. Florida. Sorry, I always mess it up.
Hiring me?
Okay, let me just.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm chairing faculty search committee. By the way, and letting me make this announcement now. Look at the faculty search ad on the notice board, and we do have 2 faculty positions open this year, and including neuroengineering. Okay, and of course, I have to talk with the head and the dean to see if, as a distinguished as Dr. Principe, well, that's possible.
Okay. So let me see if I can find my. Does anyone know how to work with this computer? Ready to use? I don't have the. Okay.
Do you get any technical help on the back? No, no one.
Computer, I find it, but you know I have. My finger is not working, so.
Let me
okay.
see if
I think I got it.
all right. You work it out, Jose. Now I got my video up and running now. So I give people a break, and now you could see how accurate your imagining experiment was either accurate or not. And this is just to show our experiment that a virtual helicopter is flying and being controlled by the subject from EEG alone. Actually, we just use mode imagination and paradigm to control. All right, Dr. Principe is ready, so let me switch back.
All right. Sorry for this. So I'm going to take a slightly different perspective from my previous distinguished colleagues. I'm going to talk about the design challenges for brain-machine interfaces from an engineering perspective. And it turns out that about 20 years ago, my laboratory implemented in the next computer what I call the Cortical Mouse. That was, you know, a way of substituting a typewriter just by thinking about, you know, moving the cursor in the screen by thinking about yes or no. So the computer will be flashing at you some words. You'll be thinking yes and no, and we, in real time, using the N400, we were able to distinguish what to control a cursor in the screen. This was done 20 years ago. I happened to find one of my previous students at the time, that now is professor at the University of International University in Miami, and we obtained about 4.5 bits per minute on this system. Well, we are 20 years later, and I think the proof of concept for BCIs has been established. But we still have, I think, a long way to go. Because right now, if you look at the literature, the bit rates that have been achieved so far are on the order of 35 bits per minute if you use external brain activity, or 180 bits per minute if you use spike trains. And so I think the fundamental question that I think we engineers should address is how do we increase the channel bandwidth between brains and machines? I think this is a very important problem. Because, as I said, the proof of concept, you know, has been established, but now we have to make it useful for the normal population. Of course, this has been useful already, and it will continue to be useful for disabled individuals. And of course, if I ask my neuroscientist friends, you know, they say, oh, you have to increase the number of probed neurons. And this is absolutely correct, because the brain is a distributed system. So the more you know, electrodes you have, you can basically add the information in these channels if they are independent. And so this will increase exactly the data rates. But from an engineering perspective, and since I'm an engineer at heart, this is what I want to tell you, is that we should be thinking about architectures and new signal processing methodologies. Okay, so this is really what I'm going to tell you. And in order to do that, we have really to go to the biological model and understand how the brain interacts with the world. And there is what is called the perception-action reward cycle. That is the fundamental method by which the brain creates internal representations in the world. The brain uses the body to go over the causality line to predict points in space. And with the prediction is right or wrong, then it is able to modify the parameters of the models. So this is the cycle that is called the perception-action reward cycle. And if you think, then if for a person that is unable to move, so the BCI appears exactly in this quadrant, right? And so the obvious thing to do, and this is exactly most of the methodologies that have been tried so far, is that you have the brain signals. If you know where the position in space that you like to achieve, then this becomes simply a signal translation problem. And this gives rise to what I call the first generation of VMIs. The problem of this is that the brain is a plastic system. All right? So the plasticity of the brain has two important consequences. First, the individual can effectively, even with a non-optimal model, achieve its goals. Okay? And on the other hand, from the engineering side, this plasticity of the brain means that I would like to be able to continuously adapt my model. And so this gives rise to what I call the second generation of VMIs, where, you know, the VMI becomes much more complex system in the sense that it should be effectively a controller. Okay, and we are presently working with reinforcement learning to effectively establish a dialogue between the brain and an agent that is able to exactly translate and extract and translate what the brain activity and intent of the subject. And so with this type of devices, I think that we may be able to maximize the transmission of information between brains and systems. And we should come up with architectures that should be able to learn when and what, and also somehow maximize information transfer. This part is the one that I think is more interesting. And since I don't have time, I would just like to give you two possible architectures that we call symbiotic VMIs. And by the way, this work is not only on my lab, it's with Dr. Justin Sanchez's lab and Dr. Joe Francis' lab at SUNY. This is an example of symbiotic VMI for reinforcement. And basically what you have is you have in a feedback loop the robot and the brain, and they both are rewarded in the same place in space. So you have still rewarding in the external world to make this happen, and this has been, this concept have been proven in this paper. The second possibility is go beyond this and go to the actual centers in the brain that are the reward centers in the brain, in particular the nucleus accumbens. So and extract from these centers exactly the intention of the subject. And this creates other architectures like the actor-critic architecture that is an example, and that has been tested also in Dr. Sanchez's lab. Lastly, I also would like to give you still another very interesting avenue for research, is that if you have a device, a robotic device that is interacting with you with respect to the environment, you would like to bring to the subject not only visual feedback that the subject can provide, but you also would like to have sensory motor feedback. And so what you effectively are doing, what you have to do, is basically to translate the feeling that the subject has through its normal, through the body, and excite the appropriate brain areas to effectively provide the same sensation. And this is what we are doing with Dr. Francis' lab at SUNY, and we have effectively implemented a system based on spike trains that is able to effectively mimic, in preliminary results, is able to mimic the desired response that the subject feels in S1 by stimulating VPL. So this is just a brief overview of some of the challenges that, in my view, are ahead of us. And this is a really exciting area, and we are in an amazing, good moment to provide even more engineering solutions to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose. Our next speaker is Dr. Jose Milan from Swiss Federal Institute of Technology.
All right.
So thank you very much for the kind invitation, and it is an honor to share with you some of the ideas we have in our lab and the progress that we are achieving in order to put forward those ideas. I will concentrate today on the role of shared control in brain-machine interfaces, but in particular on controlling neuroprosthetic devices, robots, any kind of robots that you can imagine. So the main point I want to make here is that there is a big challenge when you want to control any kind of prosthetic devices compared to communication tools through brain-machine interfaces. And the challenge is that in addition to require to be a high precision accuracy in the decoding, we need to face the fact that we need to be very precise also in the timing we are delivering the commands. Otherwise, you can miserably fail. You will close the hand, but when there is no glass over there, the glass is already broken in the floor, and so on and so on. So fast and timing decision making is critical. And you have seen already some videos. I will not show today any video because they are not working anyhow. But the main problem is that when you try to put together those two requirements, high accuracy, fast decision making, this can be exhaustive for people. Sooner or later, they will say, basta. I can't any longer sustain my attention and keep performing at that level. So the main question is, how can we bridge this cognitive gap so that people can devote the necessary attention to achieve high performance only when the situation requires so, and they can somehow recover their mental capabilities when there is no need to focus so highly in the task. So in order to do that, we are following several principles for any kind of device you can imagine. But today I will only concentrate on the third one, that reads blending of intelligences. How we can combine the intelligence of our subject, because we are using their brain, with intelligence of the devices, of these neuroprosthetic devices we can build. And as engineers, we know how to make them very smart. But now the point is, we need to make that link so that the intelligence of both devices fit each other. So, and this is, in the robotics community, this is called shared control. So, shared control, you can see it in this form over here, where you have your device with some sensors. These sensors, any kind of sensors you can imagine, because this will depend on the application you want to develop, is giving you, in a given sense, the context that is required to interpret the mental command that people are delivering anytime. So, for example, you can use those sensors, cameras and proximity sensors, as I have written over there, to gather this environmental information so that you can know where there are obstacles, where there are free passages, where there are potentially targets that you want to reach, a glass over there, something like that, so that afterwards it is a question with the combination of the mental commands that the user are delivering to say, okay, it seems that the glass I want to take, if there are several, is towards the right rather than towards the left. And then you simply plan that over there. But this is a dynamic thing. It is changing, say, 16, 20 times per second. You are reconsidering those decisions. So in particular, what we do is to use computer vision systems, very cheap webcams that we can attach to our systems, in this case a wheelchair, so that we can detect objects in the environment. And now the challenge is that some of those objects are definitely obstacles to avoid, a wall and so on. But others will depend. A person in front of you is something you want to avoid, or it is the target because it is to him you want to talk to. So again, this decision can be inferred from this shared control perspective, depending on how the subject is trying to navigate in the presence of that object. You will infer whether this is a target or this is an object to avoid, and then you can do whatever you need to do at the level of the intelligent wheelchair to approach or to avoid smartly. So just to give you an idea of the power of this shared control, and if you want to learn more about this, please come later to our session where I will present those results. What I want to show you is that we have been talking before about patients. Well, these results are with patients, real patients who could need this telepresence robot. And what you can see, I will not enter into the details, the main thing is that they can perform equally well with mental control in a very complex task as with manual controls. And in some cases, the only way for them to send commands is with the head, boom, 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 okay? Because this is the only thing they can do. No more motor capabilities left, okay? So this brings me to another point. If we want to reduce the cognitive workload for people, we cannot pretend that people need to deliver commands 16 times per second continuously. As I said before, this is exhaustive. So the main point is that even with a very simple brain-computer interface, 2 mental commands, say left and right in order to steer your wheelchair or mobile robot, you can still have a third command. Because actually, depending on how you develop your system, you have a third command. And this is what I put over there in blue. This is intentional non-control. because people can intentionally decide, I don't want the behavior of my wheelchair to change. It is moving along the corridor, keep moving. Like that, I will recover mentally, because I will start thinking about whatever I need to think, so that when the time arrives to make a turn, I will deliver the left or right command so as to do that. And this brings me to another point, multitasking. Actually, it is useless if we have the most perfect BCI or BMI on the earth if you need to keep concentrated only on the task required to operate your BCI. So the main point is that in real life, we are doing multitasking. We can control our arm while keeping the glass, drinking, but at the moment I am drinking, I am focused on drinking. I am not focused in handling the glass. Yet, I have control of my arm to do so. So this slide shows that people can achieve this multitasking capability. Of course, the problem is that there are some who can do that very well, whereas others, while they are doing multitasking, their performance degrades completely. But again, shared control could help enormously in those situations, because they can compensate those errors that normally are biased towards one of the things. Okay, so let me conclude. The challenges is that are two, essentially, from my point of view, is that one, we need to guarantee that we can deliver fast commands, but we need at the same time to think about how to breach this cognitive gap I was mentioning before. So I don't have yet the recipe, but at least we have developed a few principles. One of them is shared control. So principal approaches to combine the intelligences of the user and the smart devices we can develop. The second is to develop protocols or architectures, as you said before, Jose, that support multitasking and natural interaction, intentional control, etc. And today I will not talk about that, but another important thing that has somehow appeared in the talks of the previous speakers is that EEG, or brain signals, carries not only mental commands, carries also cognitive information. And if we can extract that cognitive information and combine them with the normal BMI, then we can increase, because we could adapt the workings of the BMI to the actual cognitive state of the subject. So as I said here, we can modulate interaction. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ben, and the conference organizers for having me on this panel. I guess I'm the sole government representative, but I know that there are many government representatives in the room, so at the end I'll ask them all to stand up so you can all approach them as well. My name is Grace Peng, and I am a program director at the National Institutes of Health, at the National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering, and one of the programs I manage is in rehabilitation engineering. So just to cut to the chase, my message for you all in this engineering meeting is a plea to look at the clinical needs. For example, the 10 needs that Lee just presented in his last talk, as the first thing you would consider when you design your brain-machine interfaces. So I will talk about the importance of clinical needs, which leads to clinical translation, and also discuss a future possible idea for another type of interface. So as I said, I'm at the National Institutes of Health, and we, program directors at the National Institutes of Health, work very closely together. Several institutes support the area of brain-machine interfaces, brain-computer interfaces. And so I'm at the NIBIB, and the NIBIB's mission is to develop technology that bridges the physical and engineering sciences with the life sciences. Our mission actually is to profoundly change healthcare with technology development. And so our program areas cover a lot of programs which have a lot of applicability towards brain-machine interfaces, and I've highlighted some of those. But the bottom line, if you've served at on NIH review committees recently. It's all about the impact of the project. And in terms of brain-machine interfaces, it's really important to know that you have done your clinical needs assessment in order to assess the impact of your project. So if I may, one of our institute's centers for point-of-care technologies, we use the stages of product development to illustrate the continuous assessment of clinical need when you're developing technology. You first need to characterize the problem and define whether or not it is an important public health problem that you're addressing. You characterize a solution, which may be an engineering solution. But again, I'm trying to stress that as engineers, we're always a hammer looking for a nail, and we should be really looking at the nails and figuring out what will the solution actually make a difference. Then we design the product or the technology according to the clinical needs and whether or not it will have the potential impact after you design the product. You validate the design. This may include FDA interactions for brain-machine interfaces. And then you introduce the product to see whether or not the community will actually accept your design in a broad scale. And finally, you would ultimately integrate this design to achieve the public health impact that we originally want to have. So we, as government representatives, hope that the projects that we fund will have that impact in the future. So I'd like to illustrate one of the NIBIB grantees, Dr. Mason Govinlu at Georgia Tech, whom I believe is in the room right now. He's developed this tongue drive system to also help tetraplegic subjects gain independence through this unique design in which there's a magnet attached to the tongue. You've probably heard some of these presentations already. But my point of bringing up his project is that in this project, he does a very rigorous clinical needs assessment in a way in which he robustly optimizes his design by asking the users to provide surveys and feedbacks and focus groups on designing this and on accepting this very unique system. So moving on to clinical translation, you probably have seen this funding opportunity announcement specifically for advanced neuroprosthetic research and development. This particular funding opportunity is to encourage translation and to pursue pilot clinical studies for neuroprosthetics. Now, if you look at the activities supported under this initiative, it really closely follows the product development stages that I illustrated before in terms of what you need to do for making sure that your product, your design will have a clinical impact. And I guess my warning to the community is that you may think that your design is ready for translation, but unless you really address these components, you really aren't ready for translation. I'll be happy to talk to you later about this initiative if you have further questions. Finally, I wanted to bring up another NIBIB project that we fund. You probably saw the results of this Lancet article published by Dr. Reggie Edgerton and his colleagues on epidural stimulation in human spinal cord injured subject. And this subject, after 1 year of multiple electrode epidural stimulation in conjunction with locomotor training, is now able to stand independently for 20+ minutes, as well as regain some voluntary leg control, as well as regaining bladder, bowel, and sexual function. So the conclusion is it is possible to have this multiple electrode epidural array in the spinal cord interface to help spinal cord injured subjects regain some function. And if we can just, I didn't expect to show videos, but since other people were trying to show videos, I thought I'd show this amazing video in which, in the presence of epidural stimulation, the subject is able to voluntarily move his leg when asked, and his toe, and okay, well, maybe you won't see the video. You're welcome to come up and look at my laptop. But when I was telling Dr. Edgerton about this panel, he presented me these slides in order to pose some questions to you all in terms of a possible brain-to-spinal interface for spinal cord injury. So ideally, this in the future would be some sort of bio-based intervention with stem cells. But currently, the question to you all is what would be the next step now that Dr. Edgerton and his group has proven that this can work? So he presented these slides as a concept for the architecture of a BSI. And so you have the spinal cord injury, and you would presumably have the spinal cord interface in the lumbosacral region. It could be intraspinal stimulation or epidural stimulation. You might have a brain interface with the different arrays that we've seen previously, or ECOG or EEG, that these brain controls could provide an interface for controlling the spinal cord interface. So therefore, you would then, as you've seen previously, decode brain intent to control a spinal interface and therefore translate intent into locomotion movement, and possibly incorporate sensors to help with balance, and possibly incorporate FES as well. So the questions that Dr. Edgerton wanted me to pose is, if we were to do this, which brain area would be appropriate, and do we use cortical input or lower level input, and how do we translate the brain intent to spinal interface commands? And also, what are the scientific principles that would help with this sort of assistance? So again, this is just to stimulate some thought in this area. This is my email address if you want to contact me. But I also wanted to bring up a few more slides just because I heard Dr. Thakur and Principe mention modeling. So another hat that I wear is I coordinate the Interagency Modeling and Analysis Group. We now have 10 government agencies, but representatives, about 60 plus program officials managing programs in modeling and simulation and analysis of biomedical, biological, behavioral systems. And we are focused on multi-scale modeling. And we've released 3 initiatives, and we currently have one out on the streets. And we have a working wiki in which the Multi-Scale Modeling Consortium can participate in. And actually, our wiki master is also in the room right now, Miss Stephanie Sabrin. And so you're welcome to Google IMAG Wiki and consider looking at this as a means to look at what people are thinking about in terms of multi-scale modeling if you are going to apply it to brain-machine interfaces. That's all. Thank you.